Hi there, welcome to this Educate and Innovate. And today I am talking to Ali. Ali, can you give us a little bit of background and introduce yourself?
Okay, so I am a professor of AI at Victoria University, Wellington, Te Herengawaka, and gosh, I've been doing AI research for years and years, maybe 30 years or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's come a long way since I started. But yeah, I started off studying actually psychology and philosophy, and then found my way into AI in my postgrad. I went to University of Edinburgh, which was one of the first places that had an AI department. So I went there in the early 90s and I've been doing AI ever since.
Wow. And so your interest was sparked through your philosophy. How did that happen?
Yeah, through psychology and philosophy. So I was always interested, even as a kid, in the days when we first got our hands on computers, in you know, how computers might help us think about or understand our own selves, our own minds. So, because maybe we're a computer, or maybe it's just a machine, or, how can you make something that's a bit like that? And, as a school kid, it's like, well, what can I build that behaves like a person, or that sort of like, that engages in something like a conversation. So I've been doing it ever since I was in school. Um, yeah.
Wow, I feel that's really progressive for something that you were doing 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a bunch of people people have been interested in this question, forever, philosophers and psychologists, ever since they've been around. And computers are just a new tool for asking that same questions that philosophers have always been interested in. What's consciousness? What does it mean to be me? What's it like to be a person? Those sort of questions. What's the nature of the mind? And then for psychologists, yeah, how does your brain work? That
Yeah,
question.
yeah. When you
It's
put
just
it
a
that way, it
tool.
does seem quite logical, to be honest.
Yeah.
Looking at,
So you can go to computer science, to study computer science for all sorts of reasons, and many of them are very kind of practical and engineering oriented. You want to be able to build payroll systems or sort of efficient machines that do one on another thing. But you can also use them as a tool to help us study, our own selves, and that was always my interest. But actually, for people interested in AI, there's a gap, there's a sort of gulf between two sorts of AI people. There are the ones who are engineers who are really just trying to build useful stuff. And then there's another group of people, probably the minority, certainly the minority these days, I reckon, who are interested in using computers to help understand what the hell's going on in us, that
yeah,
psychological thing. So yeah, I'm one of them. Um,
yeah. That's interesting. What would you say are the biggest challenges or opportunities with using AI?
um, well, the, to me, the most amazing and interesting thing at the moment is that we're in the middle of a proper old-fashioned scientific revolution. It's like, people may disagree, but I think that it's as big, the current innovations that we have in AI are as big a scientific change as when we discovered, when Copernicus came along, or when Darwin came along, or Newton, or, these are really very big scientific developments. We now have machines that can kind of talk to you. We never used to have that. That was always the holy grail. And in the last 2 or 3 years, we have got them, by God. So, and they're being used by everyone, which is why you want to talk to me now. Why, when you're on the bus, or sort of like walking down the street or in the cafe, you hear people talking about AI. That's never happened to me, in the 30 years I've been involved in it. But in the last 2 or 3 years, yeah, it's happening. Everyone's suddenly interested. And it's because it's an old-fashioned revolution. So I think the biggest challenges, to come to your question, are how on earth do you teach in the middle of a scientific revolution? If I was an astronomer teaching in the days of Galileo or something like that, what would I teach them? It's like, well, you know, everything that we used to teach last year, has to be revised, and it's a moving target for us these days. Like every time I teach, I have to revise my lectures, because and I've never found myself teaching things that happened like last month. But now that's what you're kind of pretty much required to do
Mm.
in order to keep up. So that's an enormous challenge. And equally, it's a challenge to give advice to people about how to use this technology, which is changing so fast, and no one really still properly understands it. Like I can put my hand on my heart and say that really no one understands it. Even the people who built these systems and pressed run, it's still a work in progress to try and work out what's actually delivering these amazing human-like abilities in these machines.
Yeah. And do you see any ethical or social issues with using AI?
Um, yeah, they're very, very powerful.
Mm.
Um, so, so the introduction of new powerful techniques always raises ethical and social concerns. In this case, one of the interesting things is that the most powerful tools are essentially delivered to us as products by very, very large tech companies that all, at least for the Western world, that all come out of Silicon Valley, that are owned by individuals. Um, and they run companies that are basically, um, yeah, whose foundation is to make profits.
Mm.
So even though these systems kind of like are rolling out to everyone and are basically like infrastructure, they're delivering something which is like, water or the roads or the pipes or something like that. But unlike most infrastructure, they're not controlled by governments or democratically, governed in any way. They just are products which are provided by very powerful companies controlled by individuals. Right now, individuals that are in the US, essentially very closely aligned with a rather autocratic new president.
Mm.
So there's massive issues around that. It's like these systems are not being optimized for the benefit of the common good or for the wider people, the public. They're set up to make money, as instruments to make money for very big, very powerful companies.
Mm.
So I'm thinking partly about these generative tools, the ones that can now speak to us or make pictures or videos or whatever. But there's also other AI systems that don't get talked about nearly as much that are having certainly as much of an impact, which are the ones in social media platforms that control the feed that you see when you log on to Facebook or X or something like that.
Mm.
There's something inside there that's looking at what you click on and what you like as a user, and then
You
learning the
magically get everything about that.
and then giving you more of the same, right? But again,
Yeah.
those systems are not optimized for social well-being. They're
Yeah.
optimized to make profits for companies, which means they're optimized to keep you sitting on your seat and keep you clicking.
Yeah.
And that might not necessarily be the right thing for society because the things that you like to click on, may have certain, qualities that push you towards polarized positions, or maybe they're just
Mm.
false because we like clicking on false things because it surprises us. So the way that the very large tech companies that make AI are governed is far from ideal, and there are many, many ethical issues that need to be
Mm.
resolved. It's not something that New Zealand can tackle by itself, of course, because these are
No.
wide national systems. So we need to participate in broader conversations about how to govern these tools.
It sounds to me, from being in the classroom and we talk to kids about digital citizenship and digital well-being and how we use our time online, that
Mm.
we need to be doing some good AI chat as well.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
that's right. We do. Yeah,
yeah, and like it seems to me, it's as a teacher, it's a great tool to help you come up with teaching ideas. As a student, it's a great tool to help you come up with different concepts that you might want to then go and investigate and study. but there definitely needs to be a little bit of learning around how it's really working and how we should use it.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely think that everyone needs to learn something about this technology, so that it doesn't appear like magic.
Yeah.
Um, so that's an
So,
interesting new
sorry.
thing, is that um, rather than just teaching AI to computer science students these days, there are special kind of entry-level service courses where AI can be taught to everyone in the university, whether they're doing, history or French literature or, whatever, they can
Mm,
come along and learn a little bit, without any presuppositions, without any prerequisites. And I think that's really important that everyone gets some. And it would be the same in schools. I think that students should learn something about what these tools, where they come from, sort of how they work.
yeah.
Yeah, some things that you can
That
say.
kind of leads to my next question, which would be what advice would you give New Zealand teachers around, first of all, how they can use AI effectively, but also when they're using it in their classes with their kids? Like, what advice should they be giving to the kids?
Gosh, I can't really offer any advice because it's too new. So
Mm,
I think we have to be cautious of people sort of like, I know about AI techniques and technologies,
yeah.
and I'm kind of an expert in that area, but I'm not an expert in use of these new tools like ChatGPT. And no one is, to be honest. They only came out 2 years ago, and if you think of expertise, that requires more than just two
Mm,
years. If you think of the standard kind of 10,000 hours, to
yeah.
be an expert, you need 10,000 hours has not elapsed since ChatGPT was released. Even if you were using it 24/7, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be an expert by that. So no one is an expert. And certainly expertise in AI technologies does not make you an expert in how to use these tools. It's a very
Mm,
separate set of skills, I think.
mm,
Um, so to me, really the best thing to happen now is that we should let 1,000 flowers bloom. We should just let people try a whole bunch of things out, and not sort of like be sort of preemptive in sort of, forcing people down certain paths or, adhering to certain principles. We need to have a big natural experiment where people try out different things so that there's some variety so we can see how things work. And then there needs to be a really good conversation about what seems to work and what students like and what they don't like and what teachers like and don't like and so on. And it needs to be open like that, I would say. And I think it would be premature to say, here's the way to do things.
yeah. Yeah. It's certainly a really broad issue and concept, isn't it? And
Yes.
there's just so much, and there's a lot of information about it. There's a lot of people teaching teachers how to use it well, how to use it to be more effective with their teaching. I certainly know students that have used it to straight out cheat on stuff, but also, used it to ask it questions to help them revise for exams and stuff. So it seems like a really
Yeah.
interesting tool. But like you said, just sort of go into it cautionary and make sure that you can't fully rely on it.
Yeah, yeah. I think you make a good point there about the sort of broadness of the topics to be covered. It's like this is not just a technical topic,
Mm,
The use of AI extends out into all areas of social science and all areas of kind of cultural studies and all areas of politics and government policy and into the law and into medicine. So basically it touches everything. And again, what's needed is this very broad, now going beyond what's happening in schools or what should happen in schools, there needs to be this very broad interdisciplinary discussion where people from different areas, kind of like get their heads together and see, what's happening in this area and how AI is being used in this area. And those discussions need to be very interdisciplinary. There need to be technical people involved in the discussion, but also people from the discipline itself and from other areas related to policy making, and people who understand how to study the effects of use or the effects on people or changes that are happening or changes in conceptions. So
mm,
it's like I used to be in this little department in a university that does computer science or AI or something like that. But these days, we have to face outwards and participate in a wider, very interdisciplinary discussion because it is just so widely used that the
And what sort
discussions.
of students are you teaching at the university at the moment? Are they going to be AI specialists, or are they looking at it from different points of view in different fields?
Well, some of them are doing our AI major. We have a new AI major at Vic, and
Wow.
actually, it's the first one in the country, and it's kind of interesting, kind of specialized course in AI. But then other ones, like I say, are just coming and doing an entry course on AI that's just like yeah, an introduction to the
Mm,
topic. And here's what we can teach you in one trimester from scratch, not knowing anything. And that class is full of all sorts of people with, with different interests and different backgrounds and going off to do different majors, different
mm,
degrees. So I think that's the mixture. Some of them are on a pathway to being specialists, and other ones just need to know something about it in order to go off into the area that they're in.
yeah. I hadn't really thought about it being used in, such various areas from it. When you look at it as a teacher, you kind of just see certain elements of it. So it's quite interesting that you even have a course in that you can major in it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
to,
Quite new. I think we're in the third, I mean, we're only in the second year of this, and so it's quite new.
yeah,
We're
and
sort
I
of,
imagine that's evolving all the time what you're actually
oh
teaching
yeah,
them.
oh yeah.
Like,
So
do you
it's hard
struggle to
being
keep up with them sometimes?
it's hard being a teacher in this area because the topic to be taught is changing under everyone's feet.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
know digital
what you're saying
technology
about keeping
teachers.
up with the kids, like
Yeah.
it's certainly true that like the energy, the new techniques that are being developed, for instance, in the big companies, um, the Anthropics and the Open AIs and those kind of companies, the people who are in those companies are 20 something keen beans, that are working at the weekends. And, so it's like I'm much further on in my career, but actually all of the energy comes from young 20 somethings in
Yeah.
this. Because that's the nature of a scientific revolution, right? What happens is that people of my age basically the stuff that they learned is now obsolete
Yeah.
and the people who are newly sort of who arrived in the field as the thing was changing and had an opportunity to sort of learn the new thing from scratch are essentially in the driving seat technologically, I would say.
Hmm. It just reinforces my own thought anyway about um, we're constantly needing to learn as teachers, regardless what our subject area is, and that we need to, network and meet people and keep up to date with that information because, I've taught some digital technology classes at high school and man, they are just onto it. They just can do stuff with their eyes closed and they process everything so quickly and it's so hard to keep up with them. But that constant need to be a lifelong learner and continue to learn ourselves.
Yeah, I think that like our computer science postgrads or whatever, they're just off they go, they just like the blue touch paper, boom, off they go. Where they do need help is in thinking about the ethical
Mm.
consequences, the social consequences, because they are not, sort of like, you know, if they come out of computer science, by God, that wasn't what they studied.
Yeah.
So they really need help. And again, this is part of this interdisciplinary, the interdisciplinary nature of the field that we now have is that the people who have the power are the people who are programming these things. But those people need to know about what they're doing and about the
Mm.
consequences of what they're doing so that they can be good developers
Yeah.
rather than dive in and sort of like move forward and, progress things without thinking.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
guess,
like the older and wiser heads, can be helpful and not just within our department, but elsewhere. We want to introduce them to people, for instance, in philosophy or psychology,
yeah.
or social sciences or the humanities, because those are the fields that these young programmers are influencing with the work that they do. So yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that. I think we could talk for much longer, actually. But we'll stop there because there's probably a lot that we could cover. Thank you so much for your time, Ali. I really appreciate it. And you've got some really great words of wisdom there. So I'm going to actually go back and have a listen and write up some of these stuff. So thank you very much.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for chatting with me.